Welcome to everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Eduardo Herrera, and I have been studying, practicing, and teaching Buddhism for the last 27 years. And the intention of this webinar is to discuss, to reflect upon the different aspects of uh, connection, or the contrary, disconnection, um, as far as mind and as far as our experience of reality goes, as we are deeply disconnected. And since I have studied Buddhism for more than 2 decades, almost three, I had a chance to study nearly 8 continuous years in India. I learned Tibetan, I translated both texts, and teachers had a chance to do some short retreats, practice some rituals, be able to receive the so-called empowerment initiations, as they are called. Um, And for many years, I also experienced a disconnection to myself, which obviously didn't have anything to do with Buddhism. But my mistake was that Buddhism somehow was sought to, I sought in Buddhism a way to remedy this disconnection. And not only happened to me, but to many people whom I studied and practiced with, mostly from the West, trying to exteriorize a sense of worthiness, trying to being able to connect to spirituality, but as Trungpa Rinpoche used to say, on a materialistic or externalized level. That is to say that for many years, I somehow tried to connect to myself with the otherworldly, with the transcendental, and obviously it wouldn't work. Um, in this webinar, the attempt is to reflect precisely on this disconnection that does not necessarily have to do with my story. Each of us have a different story, and at the same time, probably we have a common ground, which means disconnection. Regarding that, I want to propose to all of you that we are going to work not only on the theoretical level, but we also will be working on the meditation level with breathing techniques not related necessarily to a religious or spiritual aspect of it, but more to try to create some tools, some means for connection upon which or based on what we will be discussing. So when we will begin to reflect on this that we're calling connection. I'm sorry, why would we be calling regain connection? Where we lost connection, basically. So in this context, I would say that all human beings have a need for connection. There is a theory, one important psychological school called attachment psychology, tells us that all human beings need to have connection. In books by the psychologist Brené Brown, you can look for her books, The Power of Vulnerability, or else you can look for her at TED Talks. The psychologist Brené Brown asserts that all human beings are craving for love and connection. And that's just basically a human need to feel worth it, to feel needed. And again, what Buddhism proposes to all of us to start with, not only that things are impermanent or love and compassion in the beginning, but what Buddhism suggests is that we are all interconnected. And in this interconnectedness, we can find how now with the COVID-19, now with this pandemic situation we are all living, that at the same time is bringing the economic relations to a halt. Again, we are reflecting on interconnectedness. But what happens if that disconnection did not happen with the COVID pandemic, but probably we already had it from before? Probably we were disconnected from childhood. Probably the outward fixation that we or most human beings have on material accumulation, on knowledge accumulation, looking for recognition, looking to be famous, looking to be followed, looking to be a trender on social media. What is it telling us about the human species looking for a sense of worth, looking for a sense of meaning? So I want to begin this talk, as we have said, on connection and interconnectedness. All human beings aren't self-arisen. We aren't born talking, walking. We aren't able to really be self-reliant. We depend on others. And actually, our human species is the most dependent animal on Earth. We have the longest period of maternity. Then we spend around 12 years so that we are reared, we are educated, we are taught how to eat, how to talk, how to drink, how to take care of ourselves or be away from danger. And what happens is more than just learning from something from our parents, the dependence on our parents just underpins the need that our parents at the same time needed their parents, and at the same time their parents, our grandparents, needed their parents, but at the same time we are on this so-called field of interconnectedness, whereas you can see, for example, the TED talk by these scientists, Chinese scientists, called Tom Chi. Probably my accent isn't as easy. Tom Chi. He underscores at this talk the interconnectedness not only of society and economic production chains, but also he underscores how our heart, for example, has one key component in the hemoglobin, which is iron. Iron wasn't found on Earth naturally unless it happened thousands of millions of years ago, billions of years ago, through star explosions that we got iron into our world. And that is a key component for hemoglobin, for breathing, which is related to a process which happens millions of years ago. At the same time, he talks about unicellular bacteria, which again existed billions of years ago on Earth, which is responsible for the oxygen we breathe nowadays through the ozone layer and through the atmosphere. He underscores how necessary is that all living organisms, relate to one another because our existence is dependent upon others' processes and others' existence. However, now with the COVID-19, and now there are even talks on social media about the COVID divorce, about the COVID disconnection, about the COVID diseases which are related to the virus, with suicide, relating to a high consumption of addictive substances, be it alcohol, be it opioids, cocaine, meth, codeine, or whatever substance, which only shows our deep, entrenched disconnection that we had it as human beings. The last decades have only shown the intensification of disconnection that we have been feeling through the last centuries of war, of eviction, the forced migration, the disconnection that we've had nowadays after the Second World War, the growing disconnection between parents and children because we were promised an economic boom, we were promised a riches, and again, we increase the distance between parents and children, which again, part of this introduction is related to the fact that all human beings need, because of their long dependency on others, particularly parents, particularly on the mother, we basically need this implicit sense of love and belonging, the implicit sense of being good enough, of being worth it. This will bring us exactly to the question of love. Love is not what I'm referring here is not romantic love. It is not falling in love with your better half. It is not basically that someone is going to be responsible for you for the rest of your life. It's going to love you, listen to you, and it's going to be the most amazing person that will understand you. On the contrary, we find that human relations in general are on a crisis because we are unable to relate to ourselves. This is the basic question. Why are we unable to relate to ourselves? Because the relationship to ourselves, it has to be learned. It has to be received from our initial connection to another human being, in this case, our mom, or in this case, our father, or any mature adult presence. On the contrary, we are born, as the speaker Thomas Hubel explains. I'm going to write it here so that we're having too many thumbs now. I think it's with the H, it's a German. Thomas Hubel mentions we are born into a pre-traumatized society. We are born into a traumatized or pre-traumatized field or societal field where relations or relationships among not only the family, what Buddhism calls a mandala. Mandala, it is not something like mystical or magical. Mandala means an energetic or energy structure. An energy structure has to do again with a family, with a society as a whole, because in the energy structure of the family is where we learn how to love, how to relate to ourselves, what's our relationship to truth, to faith, to love, to fairness, and so on. So basically, as we are experiencing the disconnection now related to COVID-19, what's happening on an individual, familiar, and again societal level is that people start experiencing a deep disconnection. It's as one commentator said, the COVID-19 is as if you put one magnifying glass and look through your disconnection, and obviously you don't like it. It's as if someone gives you $5 million right now, and it's when your habits, when your passions, when your fears will emerge, because you have all these possibilities, and you cannot escape from that. Now confined in our rooms, with our families, with our sense of purpose, with our sense of love, is how we start recognizing how are we related to one another. I began this talk speaking about how for many years I have been a very passionate Buddhist meditator, a student learning Tibetan, translating it, eagerly going to empowerments, teachings, knowing many teachers from the Himalayas, but at the same time, I couldn't relate to my own fear. I couldn't relate to my own contradiction, to my obsessive thinking. And it was basically, as Buddhism said, when you're confronted with trauma, when you're confronted with pain, and you try to look for what you've learned, or you can no longer pretend that you are a doctor, or that you are a scholar, or that you are a meditator, or that you are a parent, or that you are a spouse, is when you are basically face to face with something which you can't hide anymore. And I can probably say that Buddha's teachings on trauma, which are usually called suffering, is what it taught me to be more genuine, is what it taught me to understand the meaning of impermanence. How, and I don't want to sound like a cliche or a pop song, but how life is short, how you don't need to be meaningful to others unless you start being meaningful to yourself. And that's what I tell you, there were not months, but years of struggle, of self-inspection, of self-questioning, where I could relate more directly to that deep sense of disconnection. And something that I discovered is that I was not alone. I discovered that the search of meaning and of worthiness that all human beings relate to, that all human beings are obsessed with compulsive thinking, or obsessed with a compulsive shopping, or compulsive drinking, or compulsive eating, or compulsive relationships, which sometimes are utterly dysfunctional. And I got a hint of how somehow we are looking for means of being worth of connection, worth of being loved, worth of being seen, but we are usually looking for that outside ourselves. And as the psychiatrist, Canadian psychiatrist, Gabor Mate, different name now, psychiatrist and author of several books, one of them called Scattered, another one In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, where he describes another form of obsession, which is called, yeah, I can see that through the reflection, you don't see the name. Don't worry, I'll write it here. Again, Gabor, because the name up here doesn't, it's, so, and then he again underscores another aspect of human obsession: pain, trauma, trying to mitigate, trying to get rid of that pain through drugs, through psychoactives, through opioids. And one of the basic tenets of his work is related to pain and how drugs are a pain reliever. How on the cerebral level, how on our brain, we lack the basic connections in childhood, how in the first years we lack of the loving, mature presence. Not because parents are bad, just because parents are having their own traumatized experience of their own childhood when they become parents, because memory comes or stems from context. So once they have you as children, their trauma unconsciously can activate, can be triggered. And that also is experienced not on a intellectual level, because as a toddler, we don't have the chance of saying why mom doesn't like me, why mom is stressed, why dad isn't here, why he comes and shouts and they fight. Probably has to do with me. Probably I'm not worth of love. Probably I'm causing mom her pain or her stress or her absence, which does not necessarily have to do with any fact, but our neurons and our neural pathways and our neural network feels that. And as Dan Siegel, again, I'm going to write down, I'm going to share with you some bibliography, some information in case you're interested in checking this out on a more scientific, scholarly basis. Dan J. Siegel, Daniel J. Siegel, explains how the connections inside your brain start or are triggered through the connections in the first years of life. And that doesn't happen consciously. It is our mammalian nature. It is our, again, human nature that we are one of the most underprotected, one of the most dependent animals on the food chain. as the historian, author, and speaker Harari, author of *Sapiens* and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, and so on, explains, we human beings were, until very recently, on the third echelon of the food chain. We were the most deprived of weapons. We didn't have strong claws, sabers, or tooth. We could not just go bare hands with a bear or with a or run as fast as a cheetah. And one of the aspects of our human nature is dependency on the group. As the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. So we are basically beings highly dependent, where our connections do not or does not necessarily have to do only with milk, with have to do with just teaching the child how to walk and talk, have to do with connection, have to do with teaching them how to wire their brain to make them feel worth of love, worth of belonging. So this is something, before we talk about this next concept, about the need for human beings to belong. We are born to belong. We are born to belong first to others and then to ourselves. We learn to rely on ourselves and to belong to ourselves first by belonging to others, feeling, as some psychological schools, such as the systemic schools of psychology, one of them led by Bert Hellinger, already passed away, his constellations. It's very interesting, but he speaks about the loving eyes onto the child, speaks about pushing the child, the toddler, to life, to give the blessing of life onto your descendants. And that's very interesting when we speak of belonging, because you cannot belong to yourself, and that has been proven with ample data, with a lot of research, where it has shown that disconnection in childhood will trigger trauma, which could be seen even 20, 30, or 40 years later through a deep disconnection in childhood. Sometimes it's sexual abuse, sometimes it's a violent atmosphere, sometimes it's just neglect. So belonging, in the case of a human toddler, of a human child, it is key not only for eating, sleeping, or basically be out of danger, but we need to be related through love. Now, you might be asking, oh, okay, I understand that, Eduardo. However, how does that relate to Buddhism? Good question. Buddhism is not a religion. Buddhism, and that's why His Holiness the Dalai Lama and many contemplative teachers discuss in seminars, for example, in the Mind and Life Institute seminar, they discuss about science, and contemplative science or contemplative methods, because there is a great exchange on how the world functions and how the mind functions. Buddhism is called sometimes Nangju in Tibetan, inner science. And it's inner science because throughout or through thousands of years, a human endeavor practiced by Buddhists is to look inside and see what is mind beyond the separation of mind and body, which the West has been struggling for most of its history. In Buddhism, they have actually not separated mind and body, and they actually have said something really interesting. Everything is mind. Or, said in another way, everything is cognition. Everything is awareness. And that brings us to a great deal of amazing findings that now we see, for example, in neuroscience. For example, that mind can't be found as an object. Mind is not a thing. That mind is not something that you're going to find somewhere in the brain, but actually that which is called awareness, it is produced at least by a network of a functioning brain, but at the same time you cannot find where awareness resides. Great psychologist called Gregory Bateson, who published a book for an ecology of mind, said awareness cannot be found in the brain, nowhere, nor anywhere in the body, but you can find awareness wherever awareness is put, wherever awareness is laid upon. So he actually, Gregory Bateson, write it down. We still have some space here. Bateson, Gregory, said, we usually can split cognition into subject, object, and interaction between subject and object. So awareness is not that resides on the subject and then you see the object as it exists, because then the problem of subjectivity arises. So awareness, and he studied Asian contemplative sciences, he studied Buddhism for some time. Bateson says awareness is not something, but is whatever awareness is interacting or exists in its interaction. So how or why Buddhism is related to brain and disconnection and suffering, trauma, and so on? Well, basically because the Buddha, as the Dalai Lama puts it, the first scientist, mind scientist of India, let's say, proposed the fact, he asserted the fact that mind can suffer by its own projections. Awareness, which is what he understood as mind in Tibetan, Shepa as awareness. This Shepa, or sometimes called Sem in Tibetan, Chitta in Sanskrit, that awareness will suffer by its own projections. And those projections are related to the other. But he underscores the fact that the relationship to the other has to be a constructive, loving, non-violent relationship, because as you relate to the others through your own cognition, whenever you attack, slander, kill, or hurt other people, symbolically you are hurting yourself. So in this situation or in this context, the Buddha said, we are related to one another for once, but at the same time, whatever we do unto the other will be a cognitive construction of ourselves. A more simple example. When you are angry at someone, you hate someone, and you are all night thinking, oh, that person hurt me, I wish him bad, or I hope that karma punishes him or punishes her, or whatever, we are constructing that poison in our minds. And that's why in Buddhism, suffering, happiness have to do with the training of your own mind. And that's something really important as far as belonging, as far as how important it is to build ourselves upon the others. Now, another important aspect of Buddhism, one, everything is awareness. Two, our awareness produces its own projections. On the other hand, we are related to other beings. We can cause pain and suffering or happiness and joy in others. So nowhere is more important than in childhood, as we are discussing, because it's how we get our personality. Once we are able to belong to others, then we are able to gain autonomy, to be mature, to grow up. And how do we grow up? Based on the brain connections, based on our memory of being sufficient, of being worth of connection and worth of belonging. So human beings have these, in this presentation, these two basic stages, belonging and becoming. And what happens to a world which is mainly addicted, hyper stimulated, hyper connected, hyper depressed, overly anxious, overly violent, depending on the next paycheck, thinking that the problem is the other, estranging ourselves from ourselves. I'm not saying your neighbors, because you no longer know what their name is usually, or you hardly say hello to them. You don't even know their lives, but you are also estranged from yourself. And that's one of the areas where we are questioning the most our human history and our human development, which is called disconnection. Disconnection in the sense that we are estranged not only from nature, estranged not only from our jobs and purpose of life, estranged from our fellow human beings, but paradoxically, we are also estranged from ourselves. And that inability to relate to ourselves is what is causing this pandemic, not of COVID, but of depression, of anxiety, of ADD disorders, of PTSD disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, or We can say different psychiatric conditions, which is unusual and which happens all the time, where there is a toxic culture which does not realize its toxicity. We are born, again, coming to Thomas Hubel, into a toxic and pre-traumatized culture, and we think it's normal. We think it's normal to be depressed, normal to have a serious and ever-growing problem of loneliness in the world, where people relate through social media, masking their real feelings, and they just portray their happiness, the amazing food that they eat, because they also like click on their spaghettis or their holidays, which they live in an illusory happy world of an illusory avatar or personality they project into, to illusory friends, which you don't have real friends. They are mostly strangers, which they don't see who you are. And whenever you see a profile, you don't see either who they actually are. Fake lives, fake friends, fake experiences, which they only make a perfect match with fake news. Having said that, that actually has to do with a deep estrangement from ourselves. And it doesn't have to do with any political, economic ideology, doesn't have to do with any conspiracy, doesn't have to do with any religious or sexual inclination or disposition you may have, has to do with basically having learned your worth of love, belonging, of expression, of being creative, of being assertive, of being in your deep unconscious a unique human being, which is worth of love and connection. So what is happening? Could it be due to drugs, due to excess television or internet, or maybe the bootleg, maybe the alcohol sold or tobacco, or maybe are the greedy oil or pharmaceutical entrepreneurs, could be the Chinese or the Russians. Who do we think is responsible for all maladies, for all those, for this deep trauma and deep disconnection, this deep addiction, this deep loneliness, this solitude, this sadness, the rates of suicide, the rates of cancer, which you say, well, that's bad luck, that's DNA, that's it. Controversial or not, Bruce Lipton has shown how a cell gets sick in a petri dish, in a culture where there are other sick cells. On the contrary, if you put a stem cell in a petri dish, which you have like bone cells, that stem cell will become a bone. So if that is not compelling enough, we are constantly not only making millions of cells by the second, but again, our thoughts and feelings trigger epinephrine, trigger adrenaline, cortisol. They trigger our immunological systems. The amygdala also goes off all the time because we are tense, because we haven't, we aren't going to be able to pay the credit card, or we overspend last time because we felt depressed, or we overdrank, or we said things, whatever. So obviously, not only a societal culture which might be in trouble, but also the cultures of ourselves which we are making um, alteration in our nervous system. So many autoimmune diseases, uh, multiple sclerosis, problems with breathing, problems, heart diseases. Why people study that through DNA or through hereditary conditions you get cancer or heart disease, but why they don't study the children that they don't get it, which they come again from the same parents. What are the conditions that make ourselves sick, sad, disconnected through to our bodies, to our fellow human beings, to ourselves? Probably has to do with a lack of purpose of meaning. And I'm here not appealing that you should learn the purpose of meaning through a pep talk. I'm just trying to say that maybe we are responsible of one another in creating a healthier environment in the family. We could probably also be more responsible as far as loss of maternity, spend more time with the children, that parents shouldn't be overburdened with debt, with the externalization of happiness with a house, with having kids in college. I'm not saying that it's bad to have cars or kids in college or a nice house, but I'm saying that people are indebted with the promise of achieving happiness and achieving acceptance. Why don't we teach children to be sufficient just by being themselves? Why don't we teach them that they are worth of our love because we spend time with them and we are not overburdened with anxiety as parents? Why don't we learn just to be enough, just to be relaxed with what we have? As Mathieu Ricard, this important biologist, photographer, and Buddhist author and speaker says, and he's paraphrasing Mahatma Gandhi, where he says, there are enough resources for the need of all people. But there aren't enough resources for everyone's greed. And that's very important because greed has no bottom. Greed has no satisfaction. We always want more. We are always running away from ourselves. We are always trying to demonstrate, to be this externalized version of ourselves without sitting and resting, without being able to touch upon our fears, which is a great experience. Touch upon our trauma and says it hurts. See the source of our pain, see the source of our disconnection. And it might not be pleasant in the beginning, but it gives you something really important, which is authenticity. So, I will be right now closing this idea. I think there is enough information again to digest at this point. But I want to close this initial presentation just making a small synthesis of what we've spoken so that we can tie it together and we can understand. Regain your connection has to do with certainly recovering a natural connection that we all naturally deserve, which we can all naturally gain again. And the reason we say recover it is because connection has to be learned as human beings. Buddhism underscores the fact that we are all related to one another. That's called pratitya samuppada, interconnectedness, or sometimes it's called, it's translated in a more formal fashion, dependent arising. Whichever way it is, the Buddha pointed out that even a dewdrop on a leaf could have the story of the whole universe because everything is related to one another through cause and effect, which he called hetu karma, like karmic cause, and pala karma, which is called karmic result. Since we are all interconnected, our own connection or our own happiness or our own purpose, or meaning of life has to do with the connection, with the nature, with the sentience of other beings. Having said that, we also mentioned the importance of belonging, and in our human situation, we are one of the most dependent, not dependable, dependent beings on the animal species because our time for rearing, for nurturing takes really long because our brain is finally formed when we become 25 years old. We don't usually gain autonomy or independence until we become 12 years old. Now imagine this when human beings have a life expectancy of 40 years. 12 years of complete dependence. So they had to reproduce when they were 14, 15, 16, which I'm not saying I agree with that or is legal. I'm just saying that is most of the history of human, most of the human's history. So again, our dependency has to do with belonging to the tribe, with belonging to a village, with belonging to our parents. But our economic miracle since the first industrial revolution, what happened is that we began estranging ourselves from nature, from our work, from ourselves, from our fellow humans, and that brings a deep psychological anxiety. That self or culture imposed isolation, and I'm not referring to COVID-19 here, I'm saying that we have become part of a narcissistic society of a self-centered human beings, which we only see others as to cover our needs. Our intimacy as human beings have become basically a need to remove a sexual desire. And once you have a sexual desire fulfilled, then you get rid of the other, or you no longer want to have commitment. We said that we are born into a sick, estranged culture. And as human beings are being born into this pre-traumatized field, pre-traumatized mandala, again, we think that is normal. And that sense of normalcy brings about all these difficult symptoms of children committing suicide, cutting themselves with blades in wrists or ankles without knowing why. Children being violent with video games, with weapons, or basically having so many like states or diagnosis of ADD, ADHD, different forms of autism. Nowadays, again, we are medicating children thinking that basically what we need are substances in the brain or professional daycare people to take care of our depressed or depressed or anxious children. What we basically need is connection. And we have created a monster, which is called the market, which is beyond human beings. And because of the market, we have to cut jobs, we have to destroy more rainforests because the market needs it. And without the market, which is like our new God, is what's going to bring happiness. And we all need to be in the market. We all have to be tapped into a credit card, a chip. We need to be tapped into a surveillance of belonging instead of belonging as we have as human beings in history, which is belonging to tribe, to clan, to children, belonging to yourself, belonging to your time on earth. We probably live twice as much as before, thanks to science, but we don't live 1/10 as human beings as before, because we are estranged from ourselves. So again, we spoke about the question of love, and I didn't say romantic love, which of course it doesn't exclude it. But a question of love is a question of want, of saying to your children, you are worth it, of saying to your children or to yourself, no matter what happens, you don't have to run away from yourself. But what happens when we abandon children, when we don't spend time with them, when we beat them into a pulp, when we as parents are addicted or violent or abusive in different ways? Naturally, we are inheriting pain and trauma. And I have heard many young people who come to me and say, I'm not worth it. Mom didn't have time to spend with me, and I hate myself. Self-loathing. And it's not that I mean like people from the fringes of society. It's actually quite spread how we are disconnected. So finally, what does that have to do with Buddhism? Buddhism proposes not only an intellectual approach to this situation, but proposes reconnecting to others through loving kindness, through compassion. Meditation is not seen as basically disconnecting yourself from the miserable world and connecting to the other world or to the transcendental nature of things, but basically to connect to the world, connect to our pain, connect to our impermanence, to our disconnection, to our sense of worth, to our compassion, to the to have awareness of others, to awareness of oneself, to having life basically be seen, as Buddhists say, a precious opportunity for awakening. And what would awakening mean if we are completely violent to ourselves? If we abandon our basic sense of dignity, if we don't feel worth it, and we are just like, as happened to me, like Buddhists, like intense Buddhists, if you don't have a sense of love or respect or tolerance for others. So that's an important reflection, and I don't pretend to have the answers. I don't pretend to have the knowledge. I'm just bringing questions, bringing different angles for reflection, for understanding on how these important, necessary discussions that we must have, how all this construction or co-construction or co-elaboration of reality. The word collaborate, it comes from co, meaning many, meaning others, elaboration, to elaborate with others the nature of our reality and the nature of our sanity. So closing these ideas where we touch upon interconnectedness, trauma, belonging, briefly loving kindness, briefly meditation, is what I want to bring about right now. Meditation in the context of being able to regulate, to establish a sense of balance within ourselves, sense of presence. Sometimes it's called mindfulness, but basically relating to the moment without the narrative, without the description of your life as if you were eternally on social media, like, okay, now I'm meditating, people. I'm having a great time, you know? Oh, it's incredible, the deep connection and the deep samadhi or satori, or I felt the Shakti, and here is my selfie during that time. So basically, it's a sense of calmness. Reduce the sense of rush, of pushing yourself to be better. Why do you need to be shown to be worthy to others in social media, in the work, in your shopping sprees? You basically, in meditation, you relate to the moment. And since that is related again to our breath, we're going to focus on this first exercise on the breath. Yesterday, during the Spanish webinar, I gave a complex exercise for breathing, and then I thought, I'm going to teach that, but first, there is a very simple method where we can relate to the instant through our breath without any need of forcing ourselves into a very exotic cross-leg meditation posture. No, we don't need that. We can actually meditate again also on a chair, as long as usually recommended to have your spine, your back as straight as possible, and sometimes to have your shoulders open, not excessively open, just open, not to be like, with this posture, which again brings about drowsiness or sleepiness. Just try to be, spine straight, shoulders open. And if you're able, if you meditate usually or have been training, you can obviously have your crossed legs. I'm not going to spend time right now speaking about 7 points of Bhairochan and so on. Basically, I want us to relate to 4 stages of breath. Usually, we take the air in, we inhale, breathe in, right? And then this is called in Tibetan U. Then we have the stage where we hold the breath inside. Even if we are breathing normally, there is a small lapse between breathing in and breathing out. That stage is called ne, ne, which means like remaining in Tibet. So U, breathing in, ne, holding briefly, then breathing out, calm, we breathe out. And then the 4th stage is called chi ne. Chi means outside, ne, remain. Meaning, once you finish breathing out, you hold the breath. That means you don't pull back air. You don't breathe in again immediately. You remain as long as possible with the breath, having breath out. You remain without breathing in as long as you can and as long as it feels comfortable. I repeat, 4 stages of breath with a comfortable meditation or sitting posture. Our head can be a little tilted downwards. If we have our eyes open, we try to follow like, the trajectory of our nose. With that angle, we follow our eyes. Dumjom Rinpoche, a great meditation master, said that if you meditate with the eyes open and don't get distracted, then you can awaken faster. But if you are also comfortable like closing your eyes and that doesn't trigger, that is easier, doesn't trigger like sleepiness, it's good enough. So the most important are not the eyes at this moment, but is to focus on the 4 stages of breath. Here, I don't advise to count numbers or to have everything very mechanical. I just advise you to breathe slowly, breathe in slowly. You can imagine that the breath goes to the area of your stomach, even though we know it doesn't happen that way, but it just goes really inside. Slowly you breathe in, and then you hold for around 4 to 5 seconds, even though you don't have to count it, as I said. That's ne. Then you breathe out slowly again. And as you breathe out, you will hold the breath as long as you can. I mean, you don't have to faint or anything. And what you will experience is like the uneasiness of your body, which will require breath, will be anxious. I need some air, body. Breathe in right away. So you hold there, but most important, you keep awareness of the present moment there. As you feel it really necessary, then you breathe in again. Slowly, you hold the breath briefly. Breathe out. Hold it as long as possible outside and continuously you follow, what is important is not a mechanical or step-by-step aspect of it, is to have awareness as the most important criteria with uh, this exercise, with this advice of the 4 stages of breath. So I'm gonna use this to start the exercise and again to end it. We just relax. We don't need to run for our incense or light a candle or anything. We just start. Awareness of the present moment. We don't judge. We don't describe. We just focus on present awareness. this is a short meditation related to being able to anchor our awareness to the breath. The reason we hold our breath in different stages and levels of intensity, it's forcing the mind not to take breath for granted, because that is the moment as we breathe that we start producing thoughts, and again, not being conscious of our subconscious or unconscious uh, thoughts and feelings. We start again like creating anxiety or creating worry or anger or depression or whatever. So meditation, more than being a mystical, otherworldly experience, one of the most important parts of it is to relate to yourself. That's why sometimes the higher the Buddhist teachings go, the simpler they become. For example, the great perfection, Dzogchen. Um, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying that it requires, as compared to, for example, Buddhist Tantra, like commitments and rituals and offerings and samayas, and you need to repeat so many mantras, so many practices of this or that, as long as you understand that mind's awareness is present, it's undivided between subject and object, as we have described, then you can start in the process of awakening, and you are not going to repress your thoughts or run away from them, but you start actually seeing them as an expression of your own clarity, of your own purity, of your own awareness. And well, it's worth having a look at those teachings. As you probably know, I actually didn't mention Centrohimalaya is its main seat is Mexico City, and then we have also centers in San Salvador, Ecuador, Cuba, and so many people. Yesterday, we connected to people in Spain, Argentina, Chile, Germany, US, Canada, and other places where, it's not so much to create an institution, but actually to share the approach in Buddhism related to neurosciences, related to an evolving dialogue, an evolving discussion on human realities, human psychology, on meditation, on contemplation, and then again, also being able to uh, receive authentic teachings. We have like also Tibetan teachers from different lineages teach different aspects of meditation, which again is very enriching as far as a human development goes. Now, I want to share another practice of meditation, and this has to do with forceful breathing, and might be contradictory when we were relaxed, aware of our breath. But this forceful breathing, it's a practice where we are able to awaken our senses, sometimes our like emotional or let's say psychological upheaval or stagnation, when we are altered, or even when we are physically uneasy or ill. It's very useful to use this forceful breathing. It is called in Tibetan Tsa Lung. In Sanskrit, sometimes it's known as pranayama. This belongs to the Tibetan tradition, if that could be said. Um, and then again, when you have forceful breathing, you activate, as it's been researched for the past decades, it actually activates like our immune system. It activates again our lungs and its full capacity of taking air in, and it also like clarifies the mind. And these silent practices, as we're going to do it right now, is going to be an easy stage silent practice. Um, it is called Bumbachen in Tibetan, or Kumbhaka, like vase as a flower vase breathing. And the way it works is, first of all, we take our thumbs, and the tip of our thumbs, we will place them on the base of our ring finger, okay? The tip of our thumbs in the base of our ring finger, and we close, right? I will approach to the camera so you can see it this way, and we close it. Sometimes you see Tibetans do like that, or do like that, or like that. The point is to block the base of our ring finger with the intention that we can block one channel, which is called a disturbing emotions or disturbing energy channel. But we aren't going into that at the moment. We are just going to focus on the technique for the time being. As I said, we usually have also like diploma tours teaching some Buddhist psychology. We go in depth into certain things, into also like Bardo studies, like the intermediate state after death, which is something which I call deep psychology, because it focuses on the workings on the mind once we die and also before we die. It's really interesting. And we have also a diplomature on mindfulness on different levels. It's mindfulness based on Buddhism, not only on techniques, from the different levels of teaching. Sometimes traditionally we say the 9 yanas, or the 9 vehicles of Buddhism. Somebody wrote something here. Okay, great. Great, Stella, that you are following the course. Nice to hear from you again. So, having finished with what I said, again, we place out the tip of our thumbs on the base of our ring finger, and we place our hands like this, right? Like our palms, like facing upwards, like this, and we try to stretch our back a little bit. But this is not where it's complicated. Where it's complicated is where what I'm gonna say right now. It's as we breathe in, we will have to fill our stomach in with air, expand our stomach once we breathe in. And when we breathe out, then we contract the stomach. Expand, contract. Breathe in, balloon, inflated. We breathe out, the air is out from the balloon. Sometimes these people report is difficult, but what we learn in the gym, or is when we breathe in, Usually we pull up the chest and our stomach is like flat. And this is actually the contrary. When we breathe in this exercise, our belly goes out like a balloon. When we breathe out, goes in. Breathing out the belly, and then when we breathe out, in. Well, doesn't seem that difficult. As we hold our fingers and hands, as we relate it, we will start right? Obviously, you're gonna need tissues, right? In order to avoid any accident. In case, again, you have some issues with the nose or some cold, whatever, now that is fashionable. So we start doing this. And you will hear a clap. Once I clap my hand, you will hold your breath. You go like forward as you breathe in. Once you hear the clap, you try to pull out your belly with the air in. That's why it's called base. Like your belly will be like symbolically a base. It's important, Tibetans say, that you close your lower openings. You hold the air for as long as you can, for as long as you can, 1 minute at least, or try to hold the air as long as you can, but really hold it long, not like, oh, I feel a little uncomfortable, then I'm gonna release the air. No, you hold it. Once you need to breathe out the air, you are in this position, right? Fingers, hands, you pull up. Again, your back is really straight, your belly's out, you're holding the air. And once you need to breathe out, you relax your body, you no longer stretch, and breathe slowly in the beginning. They call it shooting an arrow, metaphorically in Tibetan. Slowly in the beginning is like pulling the string, and then the exhalation, the breathing out is through the nose, the same as the breathing in. We don't use the mouth in this exercise for breathing out or in. So we don't do with the mouth. We just exhale, breathe out through the nose. So we're holding the air, long time. We need to breathe out, relax the body, and we start breathing slowly in the beginning from the nose, breathing out, like pulling up the string, and then once you release the string, obviously the arrow will be shot right away. So it's like, and then, and as you breathe out like forcefully, then your belly goes in. Once this happens, then you relax your body, you put your hands on your legs. You can do the traditional way if you know it, but it's not necessarily. And then you keep on breathing, but aware of the present moment. not distracted by thoughts and emotions and how nice I look and it's amazing, I'm half enlightened, or you forget all these wandering thoughts. You just focus on the present moment, and this works wonders in your nervous system, in your immune system. It works wonder also in regulation of your nerves, of your lungs. It's, you know, it's being researched how like also breathing techniques bring about all these benefits, and again for brain, but we are not going to get into that right now. So I repeat once again, tip of the thumbs into the base of the ring finger. We start breathing in, out, like filling our belly with air as we breathe in, and we empty it as we breathe out. So as we hear the clap, then we go forward, hold tight, expand the belly, close the lower openings, and we remain in this stage, holding the air for as long as we can, keeping awareness, keeping presence, mindfulness. And once we feel the need of breathing out, relax the body, breathe slowly in the beginning, and then pull out the rest of the air forcefully. Then we relax. We focus our mind on the breath, or if we have our eyes open in a point in front of us, and we work with present moment awareness. What we're doing is like we are like rebooting our whole system, our brain function, our body function, our mental, usually emotional, unconscious, like flow of distractions and fears and feelings and so on. So that's why it's greatly beneficial for health, this type of exercises and in general meditation. Okay, so we start with the exercise. We begin. Being aware of the present moment. In the next webinar, we will hold exactly next week at the same time. We will be exploring the nature of um, compassion, how to heal ourselves, how to heal our system, our emotions, how through, as traditionally said in Buddhism, uh, study, reflection, and meditation, we will be able on a gradual fashion how we can work and rely with our emotional uh, fabric, our emotional structure. And these will be related with, of course, more principles, with some teachings. Um, and again, we will be uh, discussing more on trauma, on creating a connection, but first of all, also having a look onto our trauma, our pain, or disconnection. If you're interested, we will be able again to recommend you some books or some information which you might be interested in getting. But now we will be doing a next meditation exercise. Probably before that, if you happen to have a question, you can write it down on the chat a option. You can write your questions in Spanish or English. I will be reading it or translating it if that need be, so that we can also take a small relaxed moment before the next exercise. The reason we are bringing, sharing these meditation techniques, methods, has to do with um, being able to use 5 or 10 minutes of our day to these exercises, either breathing, either concentrating. The next exercise, which we will be focusing on a sphere of presence, sphere of awareness, also, brings out different feedbacks into our mind, into our emotions. And as I said again, it doesn't work necessarily on intellectual understanding, but works more on the unconscious level, on the level of how to manage our emotions, how we can touch upon our, let's say, our pain or emotions or our disconnection. So if you have, again, a question, you can write it down or comment or something, or else we can go directly into the next exercise. Let me just check that out if we have some questions. Doesn't seem so. Q&A. Q&A. Yeah, we have Q&A, but it doesn't seem. Yeah, there are no open questions. Yeah, we have a Q&A, preguntas y respuestas. Ahí se menciona. All right, so if you have any other question, nonetheless, we will focus directly right now on the exercise, on the meditation. So this following exercise is related to a sphere. We imagine like a crystal ball, but where we are inside it. So we imagine that whatever is inside this crystal ball, it's a sphere crystal of awareness, where we have our full presence, we have our full mindfulness on it. I'll be guiding the exercise, and the point is, as we focus on ourselves, then we will be focusing on the outside world. We will be focusing on the outer objects, related with presence in a non-judgmental fashion. We can, sometimes it's said in Buddhism, not only mindfulness, but kindfulness, being kind, being altruistic is something really, really important. So again, we take a comfortable posture, could be the sitting meditation posture, or we could take a normal sitting posture on a chair. Sometimes if you want to lie down, could also be possible as long as you don't fall asleep. And try to practice to be concentrated as much as you can. So first of all, with eyelids closed or half open as we wish, we focus on our breath. And we become aware of this real life-size crystal ball around us. This wheel or sphere is full of awareness, full of presence. We are aware of it. And now we focus on our body, particularly on our head area. We focus on our scalp, but not only the outer part of our head. We bring awareness into our skull, our brain and its different parts, the prefrontal lobe, the hemispheres, the limbic system, the hundreds of billions of neural connections neural pathways, our circulatory system, we become aware of our five senses in our head: the visual, auditory, our olfactory, tasting, touching. We feel our skin. Now again, we bring awareness into our spine, our upper back, our shoulders, our throat with its veins and arteries. We bring awareness into our lungs and heart, into our spleen and stomach. And no matter if we know the name of our organs, intestines, kidney, kidneys, liver, genitals, we become aware of our nervous system, circulatory system, our muscles and tissues. We become aware of bones, joints, and we see our body as a living organism composed of trillions of cells, billions of processes. We feel empathy just by bringing awareness into each part and component of our body. Aware at this moment of trillions of cells, of processes from the brain till our toes. And now our sphere of awareness grows, expands, and now has the size of the building we are in. Now we are aware of the objects, possibly people, plants, microorganisms, tiny little living organisms. And as we are aware of them, we understand we are related. Our sphere of awareness now grows to the size of the city or village we are in. And again, we become aware of the trillions of cells of the which compose the bodies of human beings and other animals. We become aware of plants, the earth, the soil, the air, the water. And now we expand our sphere of awareness to the country we live in. Now we become aware of ecosystems like lakes or oceans, mountains, forests, and so on. We become aware now of the earth, the planet we live in, with thousands of miles of water, of the atmosphere, of the lithosphere, which is underneath. Miles of hard rock and then molten rock in the bottom of the earth. We become aware of every animal, of every human being, of every chemical component and biological process on earth. Every ecosystem. And we feel empathy. We feel connection. And now our sphere of awareness grows in size. Now to the solar system. Becoming aware of our closest star, the sun, with its massive heat. We become aware of the planets and moons of the solar system, the Earth's moon, and Jupiter's. And then we go beyond in our sphere of awareness to our galaxy. With countless solar systems. And as Carl Sagan used to say, possibly rife with life. Then we become aware of other galaxies and our clusters of galaxies and stars and pulsars that make up our whole universe. We become aware of it, understanding that the chemicals, the physical processes that make up our body right now are no different from those stars, from those clusters of galaxies. And we expand awareness as far as we can imagine, be it space or other universes. When we become aware, we include within the sphere of awareness everything that we can conceive existent. Physical processes, chemical processes, biological and mental. We remain in presence. And now, as if in a dream, everything that is included within this sphere of awareness becomes transparent and then invisible. Our body even dissolves into space-like awareness. And we remain relaxed in that which is called non-referential awareness. Relaxed, focused, feeling that awareness like space has no boundaries, has no separation. In this state of focus and relaxation, we end our meditation session. And also with that, we will finish our first part of this three-part seminar or webinar. We'll be focusing next week on the underpinnings of trauma, of disconnection with more depth. And again, we will focus on the healing parts, on how we can work on healing that part of disconnection on an individual basis, and obviously focusing on a more social or let's say collective structure. Thanks a lot. We hope to see you next week, and it was a great experience also to be sharing this webinar in English. It was requested by some people, and we thought that might be also useful. Thank you, and see you next week.